creepy enemies, unique mounts, and castle building? Now that's quite the combo. Today I played the eeriest 2D strategy side-scroller game out there. I played 100 Days of Kingdom 2 Crowns. My journey began as I, Noah, of the Vortide family, was wandering through a forest when a random small ghost approached me. Weirdly enough, he started pointing in a direction, and I was enticed to follow it. I'm gonna call you Pointy for obvious reasons. Out of nowhere, this random structure started to collapse. Instead of riding to safety, I just stood there and watched it. Very majestic. Pointy started to get a little bit impatient. So I started to gallop my horse in the direction that he was leading me. I ended up stumbling upon a whole bunch of coins. I don't know who would just leave these here, but it's their loss. I was pretty happy with the amount of coins that I got because I was able to use them to establish a camp and also hire 2 villagers. Pointy wanted me to train one of them as a bowman and the other as a builder. So that's exactly what I did. I then instructed the builder to start constructing a wall halfway around the camp. While he was doing this, I redesigned the camp crest. Obviously, it needed to follow the Vortide colors, but it had to be unique to represent this branch of the Vortide family. I ended up putting a brown ferocious bear on top of a green and white shield. Sure enough, Pointy started pointing again, and I had made my way over to a camp where I could recruit villagers. They didn't look like they were living the best lives at this little camp, so I was happy I could provide a new home for them. Pointy then requested I cut down a tree, train another archer, and then he vanished into thin air. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna miss that little guy. In honor of Pointy, I started to construct some defenses. This included building a new wall, hiring another archer, and then building 2 archer towers. While everything was going smoothly at camp, I started to head out in the search for treasure. While I was galloping, my horse got tired, and Pointy reappeared. He told me that I needed to let my horse graze over some grass in order to restore its stamina. Unfortunately, Pointy ended up disappearing again. But this time, I knew he would be back. While exploring to the left of my little camp, I came across a destroyed ship. It looked like I had the potential to possibly rebuild it. I then ran into this random treasure chest that magically opened as I came near it. Gold coins came flying out of it, and I was able to use them on a nearby camp on 2 potential recruits. As I continued further into the forest, a random projectile fell from the sky. You don't see that every day. It appeared to be some kind of bird that had crash landed. I wanted to help it out, looking for the 2 gems that it needed, but as I went further into the forest, I came across these little monsters. You guys don't look friendly, I'm out of here. I had my horse go full speed ahead as we needed to escape whatever these little things were. Unfortunately, it started to get tired, and as I started to walk, they were catching up. I had made it to a little grass patch and let my horse graze. Finally, we're almost to the camp. We made it! As I started to get cozy, the monsters attacked the walls of my camp. The single archer on that side started to take them out. Unfortunately, he wasn't very accurate with his bow, but he got the job done. Thankfully, I ran when I did, because I don't know what those little monsters would have done to me. I was able to build a little tent so that way I didn't have to just sleep around the campfire. I had collected quite a lot of gold and had even just gotten more, so it made sense to upgrade my defenses in case more of those little monsters came by. As the morning dawned upon us, I became super relieved. We didn't have to fight off any more monsters. The events of the other night had made me realize how important it was to build up a strong foundation for our camp. My only concern was, where are we going to get all the funding for this? I had remembered that this random trader who was in the camp yesterday had given me a whole bunch of coins while we were getting invaded. I was so flustered that I didn't even think about it. So now today I paid him some coins, and it looked like he was heading out to go and trade. I was really hoping that he would be able to bring back a whole bunch of gold. That way we could work on even more upgrades. While I was exploring the forest on the right side of my camp, I came across this little house that required these random gems. I honestly had no idea where I could find some from. So I just continued exploring until I bumped into an archer shrine. This shrine also required those random gems, so I just kept moving. Luckily enough, to brighten up my mood, I had found a treasure chest that had a lot of gold coins in it. After making it to the end of the island, I came across this dock that had this very strange looking portal on it. Oh no, it's those little monsters again. I was genuinely curious about them to see if they could be friendly. So I tried giving one a coin, and it just grabbed it and started running back to the portal. I had also closed the distance between me and one of the monsters to see what would happen. It started hitting me, and each time I got hit, a gold coin would fall out of my pouch. I didn't want to keep getting hit by the monster, so I threw another coin at it and started running back to camp. Well, that was eventful. Once back, I finally had enough gold to upgrade my little tent into a nice wooden keep. Even though we didn't get any new technology out of this upgrade, it did make life a lot more comfortable. To pair with the upgrades of the keep, I went out to the right side of the castle and built a new archer tower as well as some more walls. To keep things equal on both sides of the castle, I headed over to the left side. That was where I placed another archer tower and then requested a tree that was blocking the position of where I could put some walls to be removed. With the expansion of our camp, which is pretty much just a castle now, I was able to hire some farmers. You definitely don't want to overlook food, especially when there's more than 5 people relying on you. The tree on the left side of the castle had finally been removed. So I put down a wall on that side and then ordered the removal of even more trees so we could potentially expand our castle even further. I then started to scout out both sides of my castle because I wanted to see where the enemies were coming from. That was when I stumbled upon the trader with his horse inside of a little shack. So now I know where he resides. Weirdly enough, I didn't see any enemies that night. But in the morning, I went and started building some more walls and started the construction over this random little waterfall. I also tried checking to see if I had enough gold to restore the broken ship, but I didn't, sadly. I journeyed back out into the deep forest of the left side of my castle. I passed the crash-landed bird and then came across this magical treasure chest that had given me a whole bunch of gold. I proceeded even further into the forest, and when I got to a little clearing, I came to the side of a mountain. Immediately, when I saw one of those purple portals, I started to run back into the forest towards my little village. There is no chance I was going to be waiting around for those little monsters again. On the way back, I also had ordered that the destroyed ship got repaired. That chest with all the gold coins really did come in clutch. Right as some builders arrived to start rebuilding the ship, I noticed that I had to pay some more gold so we could get more pieces. I was kind of hoping that I wasn't going to have to invest any more gold to this ship, but I did, and it drained my gold pouch. As things transitioned into the next morning, I had paid the wandering trader to go and trade things for me. I had also upgraded my farm. I definitely wanted to produce even more food which could be sold for money. So, it made sense to have a bigger and better farm to do that. I then went to go check on the ship, and apparently I needed to invest even more money into it. Now that's just a scam. I ended up hiring more farmers so they could produce more money, sent out the wandering trader, and then hired some more archers. I really didn't have to hire those archers, but it seemed like there were even more and more little monsters every single night. I started to develop a theory on why the ship needed more pieces. I'm assuming that the ones that I had already paid for were being stolen by the monsters every time that they came and attacked my castle. This was super frustrating, but it was the only explanation to why there would be pieces missing the next morning. I knew hiring farmers would be the best decision of my life. You guys produce so much gold. As I angrily headed over to the ship, ready to invest more money into it, once I did, it was ready to sail. I was pretty satisfied about this, and it made things a lot better as I only had to use 2 more coins on it. So it wasn't the end of the world. Some builders ran over to redirect the ship over to what looked to be a dock. I'm assuming this is where we were going to board it and head over to the next island to explore and expand the kingdom. Once the ship was in position, I rang a bell and a whole bunch of archers and citizens had made their way over onto the ship. They were getting prepared to move out and explore the new islands yet to come. Before embarking on our next journey, I had headed back into the castle, so that way I could hire some more archers to keep the castle safe while I was gone. I then replenished my coin purse so that way I would have a lot of gold going into the new lands. It was finally time for takeoff. I had invested some gold into some resources to get us out sailing, and then we were on the water. It was now time to continue building, exploring, defending, and conquering. Real quick, if you're enjoying the content, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Our ship was destroyed as we crash landed onto a new island. Everyone survived and nobody was hurt, but it was a little bit unfortunate that our ship was destroyed. I then headed more inland with my builders and archers. That was when we came across a perfect campsite. So we started to get set up. Immediately, I started building some archer towers, walls, and then a little campfire. I set things up very similar to how they were set up in our previous castle on the other island. Things were starting off pretty smoothly. I wanted this castle up as quickly as possible, so I started to upgrade my campfire into a little camping tent. That was when I headed further into the forest and started to explore. I ended up coming across one of those small little houses that required a gem to activate, and that was when I found one of those magical treasure chests that had a bunch of coins in it. It was super satisfying to see them fly out of the treasure chest directly into my gold pouch. Now that's a good feeling. As I headed even further into the forest, I came across this random shrine which had an icon resembling farming on it. Right after the shrine was another gold chest. I had also encountered one of the little monsters charging at me. They probably weren't happy that we were now settling on this new island, and I was taking all of their treasure. As I headed back towards the village, I heard barking coming from a tipped over tree. I ended up throwing down a gold coin at it to see what would happen. That was when a dog jumped out and started following me. He followed me all the way back over to the village and looked like he wasn't gonna leave my side. Looks like I got a new companion. Since I found you in the forest, I'll call you Bear. Bear and I headed out to make more improvements around the village together. There wasn't a single thing that he wouldn't come with me to do. We even went into the deep dark forests together. I'm surprised he didn't get scared. Now he's one brave little dog. While exploring, we came across this very magical looking chest. This was a lot different than the coin one. Lo and behold, 3 magical gems had shot right out of the chest, and I picked them up and put them into my gold pouch. I was pretty certain that these were the gems that I could be using on that one random bird that had crashed from the sky. Now this was gonna be cool. As I continued exploring, I had also come across this giant rock mine. I invested some resources into it, and we started constructing a new quarry. This way, we would now be able to use stone. That's going to be a lot more overpowered when I have to fight off more of those monster thingies. They won't even make it past our first line of defense if we have full stone walls. That's going to be overpowered. I really wanted to keep exploring further into the forest, but I saw a whole bunch of monsters running my way. Looks like we're done exploring for the day. We gotta get out of here. I had made it back just in the nick of time. It looked like monsters were attacking on both sides of the castle walls, but we had dealt with them very quickly and cleanly. I had also started to upgrade one of the tents into a nice wooden keep. As the morning came around, I headed out and started constructing some more walls and then my very first farm on this new island. I needed to get a stable source of income, and that was one way to do it. The day had went by in the snap of a finger, and there were already enemies attacking my castle walls. There were only 3 of them, and once again, my archers were able to handle them with ease. I really wanted to continue exploring the scenic waterfall area that the monsters scared me away from. So I went there, tossed a gem into the water, and then this giant looking deer hopped out from behind the waterfall. It seemed really friendly, and I'm assuming I could get it as a mount, but I needed to have 3 gold coins. I made my way back over to the village where I ended up collecting coins, and then I invested them into farming so that way we could produce even more gold coins as the time came. When I finally had a spare 3 gold coins, I headed back over to the deer. That was where I was able to tame it, and I could now ride it. This was pretty awesome. It also seemed like it was moving super fast compared to my old horse. Now this is definitely an upgrade. The only downfall about the mount that I noticed was that if I wasn't in a forest, it seemed like the sprint speed was slightly reduced. This honestly didn't bother me that much though, because whenever I would be exploring, it would always be in a forest. So this mount seemed to be perfect. I started upgrading my keep once again, but I didn't have enough gold to do it. That was when the sky randomly started to turn a bit orange. This hadn't happened before, but who knows, maybe it was just the changing of the seasons. Everything seemed pretty normal. I had also upgraded my outer wall to stone. It looked pretty cool, and it now definitely could withstand a whole lot more damage. As things transitioned into the next day, I had a very eerie feeling about it. However, I headed out and started to unlock the shrine that looked like it was used for different farming practices. I had also come across one of the magical gem chests and gotten 2 gems out of it. I started to make my way back towards the castle, and that was when, once again, the sky started to turn orange. But this time, it wasn't a light orange. It was very dark, and it actually became fully red. Things were not looking good. There was definitely something weird going on. I upgraded my keep as I wanted to make the defenses around here a lot more strong. So once I did, all of the walls next to it and towers started to get upgraded to stone. A whole bunch of those tiny monsters had started to attack the right side of my castle. There was one wearing a mask. It looked like that was possibly their leader. He took a lot of arrows, and then finally his mask fell off and he was taken care of. I honestly didn't expect him to withstand so many arrows, but he did. That was a little bit scary. I hope we don't see too many more of those enemies. As the red sky started to fade back into its normal colors as morning approached, we had survived our very first blood moon. I once again had enough gold coins to upgrade the keep, so that's exactly what I did. This time, it was upgraded to stone. Our castle was no longer looking like a little wooden fort, it was now looking like a proper castle with stone walls and a stone keep. We were getting pretty overpowered, and we were able to establish our dominance over this land. I started to devise a plan of training a single knight to lead my archer forces. The Vortian military was getting pretty strong. It wasn't huge, but we definitely were getting pretty powerful. It was time to take things on the offensive. We could maybe attack one of those portals and take it down, causing no more enemies to come through and attack our castle. That seemed like it would be a pretty good idea, just I didn't know how many troops we were going to need to be able to take one of those portals down. I started to upgrade the first stone wall to the second tier stone wall. Once it finished, it was huge and looked like it was able to withstand an insane amount of damage. That got tested out right away as some enemies of the night had made their way over to my castle and started to attack. It seemed like not even a single part of the wall was damaged, and that's how you know we were going to be able to survive in this area for a very long time. Since we had the defenses down and knew that we weren't going to have any issues, I ended up hiring 3 more knights. The reality of fighting back against the monsters was going to become true in the next couple of days. This is going to be awesome. In preparations, I was going to slowly start training some more archers. Also, the further that I expanded my walls to, the easier it would be to send my troops out and attack and have them be able to retreat if need be. I really didn't think this through though. Upgrading the walls right when it turned nighttime was probably the worst decision that I could have made. I had lost at least 4 archers from that mistake. At least now in the future, I'll know not to make it again. I went to go check the other side of my castle and they were holding out pretty well. At least things were going good on this side of the castle. As I continued exploring the forest, I noticed this random dude sitting next to the destroyed ship that I was repairing. It looked like I could give him some of my gems and he would store it away in a chest for me. I then would only have to pay 1 gold coin to redeem them. So in other words, it was like a bank. It was also possible to train pikemen now. This was pretty nice, as I was now able to rely on someone doing melee damage as well as range damage instead of just having only range damage at the walls. One of my outer walls on the left side was only made out of wood. I knew that it wasn't going to be a good idea to try and hold out there, especially from what happened a couple nights ago. I ordered the upgrading of the wooden wall so that way it would disappear and we wouldn't have to hide behind it. The only downfall of this is that the builders would try and upgrade it, but the enemies were coming. I had to tell them to retreat and almost escort them back to the base while dropping some gold coins behind us so the enemies didn't kill any of the builders. The plan ended up working and I was able to keep all of the builders alive. Right at the crack of dawn, I hired 2 more farmers. This way, I would be producing even more gold so I could fund everything that I needed to. I had completely forgot that there was this little house that was sitting inside of our castle walls. I used a magical gem on it, and this lady who looked like a gardener had come out of the little hut. I ended up running over to one of my farms, and I was able to upgrade it to a 3rd tier, which wasn't possible when she wasn't with me. Looks like the farms are going to be a lot more effective now. Having assurance that the economy was going to be stable at this castle, I started to buy pieces for the ship. This way, when the time came, we would be able to sail off whenever we wanted. We wouldn't have to construct it then. Right as the next morning had approached, I had sent out my troops on the right side of the castle to attack the enemy portal. My troops were able to make light work of it, as we were able to take it out without facing any fierce resistance. Right as it collapsed, I was able to go on top of it and order the construction of a new teleportation portal. So now I could teleport to different locations. This definitely seemed like it was going to be way too overpowered. But unfortunately, there was a time limit on how long you could channel the teleportation. So, I ended up running out of time and I wasn't able to actually teleport. I then didn't have enough gold to try again. This was a little bit frustrating, but I think I had an idea of how this was all going to work out. When I made it back to my castle, we were flourishing in gold coin. The newly upgraded farms were definitely worth the price. The farmers were throwing so much gold to me that I wasn't even able to hold all of it inside of my gold pouch. A lot of gold actually was spewing out of it as I wasn't able to contain it all. Since we had just taken out a portal on the right side of my castle, I figured it would be time to take one out on the left side. So I ordered my troops to go in and start attacking it. Just like at the other portal, a small amount of enemies would make their way out of it and try and attack my troops, who were the ones that were attacking the portal. Once again, we were able to take it out. So I went over the portal remains and started to construct another teleportation portal for me. We'll be coming for you next. Once I returned back to the castle, I was able to load the catapult that I had recently constructed with fire ammunition. This would be super overpowered, especially with large groups of enemy. I sadly didn't get to see the fire shot's effectiveness against the enemies, but I did get to see it get used generally. This would completely block off the enemies from being able to attack my walls. I had headed out with my troops to take out the very last portal on the left side of my castle. I had a great plan of utilizing this dock once we took out the portal, so that way if I ever needed to return to this island, my ship would be able to land safely. But let's focus on our first priority. First, we need to take this portal out. It seemed like there were quite a lot of enemies who were coming out to fight in resistance. I honestly think it could have also been from the wave of enemies that was going to attack my castle anyways, but regardless, we had taken all of them out. Once the portal was destroyed, I started to construct the teleportation portal as well as a lighthouse. This would provide us with visibility on where to land, so that way we wouldn't destroy our ship in the future. I had ended up teleporting all the way back to my castle. Now that was convenient. I then started to put some more money into parts for the ship. I wanted to be able to sail out of here as soon as we destroyed the next portal. So, right as morning came around, I had head over to the right side of the castle and started to invade the enemy portal with my troops. It had also looked like the enemies planned on attacking back. There was quite a lot of them, and I was hoping that my troops would be able to survive this little counterattack. We did. And honestly, I'm glad that we did because that could have gone really bad. We had finally made it over to the portal area and my troops got busy. I myself started heading back to the town to collect more gold and prepare for the next island. My troops were taking a little bit longer than expected, so I headed out to try and go see what was going on. Fortunately enough, I saw them heading back towards the castle, so everything went well. Right as we got the ship up and running, all of my troops and builders had loaded onto it. We had then set sail. I honestly had no idea what to expect at this next island. I'm assuming if I started off the same way that I had done the first 2 islands, things should go pretty smoothly. But I also didn't know what kind of enemies we'd be fighting in Resistance. One improvement that I did make from the last 2 islands was that I wasn't going to spend any money on any walls. Because once you upgrade your camp to the 3rd level, all of our loyal people decide to build the walls for free, so we don't have to pay for them. We had gotten things up and running very quickly. I even was taking down some trees already, so that way we could expand the camp even further. I had gotten reports from the local people that there was going to be another blood moon tonight. That meant that we were going to be fighting off some harsh waves of enemies. I knew that I needed to prepare as soon as possible, and the best thing that I could do was probably get up a farm, so that way I would be able to have money to pay for anything that we needed. Unfortunately, the blood moon came a lot quicker than anticipated. Hordes of enemies started to rush my castle walls. Luckily enough, I had brought in over a whole bunch of archers from the last castle. Without them, this raid would have been a lot more intense and probably actually hard. But it wasn't. I was pretty satisfied that I waited for all of the troops to get on the boat instead of leaving early without them. From our previous experiences, I knew that the day after the blood moons were super peaceful. No enemies would attack. So I took advantage of this and started to go and explore, looking for gold chests and gem chests. As I made my way back after exploring, I had stopped in front of a shrine. This one required 3 gems to unlock it and then a whole bunch of gold. But it was definitely worth it as it looked like it made my walls a whole lot stronger. I then upgraded a farm, hired some more farmers, and headed out to the left side forest so that way I could explore and see what was out there. I ended up coming across a tombstone that was pretty spooky and a horse that was armored. That was when I bumped into a gem chest. As I explored further, I had found even another gem chest, which had dropped 3 gems. I was really loaded with gems. Literally, my whole gold pouch was filled with gems. Once I had scouted all the way to the dock, I made my way back over to the tombstone. I used 2 gems to activate it. The armored horse mount was now able to be used. This was pretty cool, but I still liked my deer over it. As the night progressed, I had upgraded my camp into a wooden keep, and I watched my soldiers fight off the little monsters. I wonder what makes these things so vicious. It was honestly kind of hard to believe that we were already at the 3rd island. 3 islands is quite a lot, so that means we have 3 castles already established in this realm. We were making really good progress, and the dynasty was lasting for quite some time. Pointy had reappeared, telling me to follow him. So, of course, I did. He wanted me to upgrade the farm that we had, which made a lot of sense. So, I listened to him. It was pretty nice that he just appeared to remind me of that, because it definitely was going to make things a lot easier as I needed more money. Despite having just landed at this island not too long ago, the invasions at nighttime were getting pretty intense. There was quite a significant amount of troops, and a lot of them had masks on. This meant that they had a lot of extra health. The days really started to feel like they were flying by. Most of them consisted of surviving the night and then going around and making upgrades in preparation for the next night that was yet to come. Even though it seemed like there wasn't too much getting done besides fighting off enemies and a few things here and there, we were pretty much speedrunning what we were doing on the other 2 islands. It was only a few days in now, and we already had a stable income, as well as an upgraded stone keep. There honestly wasn't anything to complain about. While I was riding by, I had noticed there was another horse mount that I could potentially tame. I had given it 1 gem and then realized it needed 4 gold pieces. I honestly thought it was going to be the same as the deer and only cost 3, but that wasn't the case. I ended up just continuing what I was doing and figured that I would come back for it later. this castle was already at the point to where we could start attacking some of the enemy portals. So I headed over to my keep and started training some knights. I trained 2 of them on the left side of the castle and also got a few more archers. Then, after we had fought off all of the invading monsters, my troops rallied and we headed directly to the portal. My troops really didn't have a far run because I had expanded my castle all the way up until the last point that you could before arriving at the portal. Attack! As usual, my troops got busy. Arrows were flying directly at the portal and pieces of it were falling to the ground. The enemies also were trying to put up a harsh resistance, but they didn't do a very good job. Once it was destroyed and all of my troops had returned back to the castle, a retaliation wave of enemies had made their way over. On top of that, it was also nighttime, so more enemies had come on the other side of the castle. That's 2 attacks in one day. A little bit unexpected, but nothing we couldn't handle. I launched another invasion on the next portal on the left-hand side. Since we had 3 different knights, I was able to send 3 groups of troops out at the same exact time. Also, on the right-hand side, I did the same thing. So we were destroying portals on both sides of the castle. Now that's what I call efficient. While the retaliation attacks were happening, I headed over to go ahead and build one of the teleportation portals. I mean, we did just destroy them, might as well take advantage and use them as soon as possible. Speaking about taking advantage, I was utilizing my farms to the fullest extent. Every time that I would walk by one, I would get an insane amount of gold coins. Geez, even after collecting my coins, I got more. So what do you do when you have a whole bunch of gold pieces and a good economy? Obviously, you keep investing into it. So that's exactly what I did. The second I had enough gold coins, I went over to one of my tier 2 farms and upgraded it to a tier 3 one. With the help of my little farmer, of course. I started to plan something pretty risky. Even though it was a blood moon, I had sent my troops out to go and take out the last portal on the left side of my castle. I wasn't going to let them do it alone, so of course I marched over to it with them. Right when we arrived, my troops got to work. They started pelting the portal with a whole bunch of arrows. It seemed like they really had everything under control on that side of the castle. So I went to go see what was going on the right side. What the heck is that thing? The walls have been breached, retreat! Things were not going good. I needed to quickly come up with a plan to make sure that I would be able to kill that giant monster. So I did what made sense and started training a whole bunch of archers. Everybody started to chip in as they threw any gold coins that they had right into my pouch. That way I was able to afford to purchase more archers so we could defend the castle walls. Alright boys, here goes nothing, give it your all. The enemy monsters had made it to our 3rd line of defense. Thankfully enough, I trained so many troops that we were able to just barely survive. Well, that was scary. Time to rebuild. As the walls were being restored back to normal, something strange started to happen. It began to snow. As festive as this may seem, it really wasn't a good thing. I wasn't 100% sure if I would be able to harvest vegetables during the winter. Probably not. I had also let my curiosity get the best of me. While I was collecting gold coins, I mounted up one of the new horses I had unlocked. I just wanted to see how things would go, and honestly, it wasn't really the best mount. It was pretty slow. So once I dealt with a full knight's invasion, I had head back to the lighthouse and upgraded it, and then switched back to my deer mount. Things were going so smoothly that night after night had kept on flying by, and for most of those nights, I couldn't even hear when our castle was being attacked. That's how safe and secure our kingdom was becoming. I was even able to expand our towers and walls right before the enemy portal. Now this was a very good strategy in my opinion, because if we were able to just launch our attack and not have to run halfway across the map, that would be pretty ideal, and we could also retreat if need be. Even though it kind of just defeated the purpose of building that tower and wall, I had sent out my troops to attack the portal. Despite getting heavy resistance from the enemies, we had lost none of our own. It also appeared that the knights had leveled up the longer that they survived and the more enemies that they took out. So the longer that they stayed alive, the more powerful they became. I went to go scout out the next portal that we would be taking on. It's almost like the enemies knew that I was approaching, and of course a bunch of them jumped out of the portal and tried to attack me. I had to retreat back to the castle, and when I arrived, I saw wooden walls. I didn't really think much of it, but I forgot that I had told my troops to expand. This was an issue because I didn't tell them to upgrade though. So once they made it to the edge of the wall to defend against the enemies, the monsters had broken through and immediately started taking out a whole bunch of my troops. Not very many of them survived. There were, however, still a few. Also, it looked like the enemies were more interested in stealing my supplies and loot that they had gotten off my soldiers. There were only 2 monsters that actually came and started to attack my walls. After a night like that, I needed more archers, so all of my gold went to training more. I even needed to withdraw some from my castle treasury. This wasn't ideal, but I needed at least 1 night to launch invasion. It appeared that my farmers had stopped harvesting crops and started picking berries instead. So while I was collecting coins from them, this giant boar around a bunch of baby boars started to charge me. I guess I was technically in their territory, but man, this thing wanted revenge. I had a whole army of troops, and they had all been knocked out by this mama boar. She was practically terrorizing my village at this point, and that was when she had knocked the crown off of my head. This was too far. Oh, I will be back, and I will deal with you. Luckily for the boars, an invasion had began on the right side of my castle, so I had to go and monitor it because I wanted to make sure that all the troops that I had trained were enough to defend the castle. Things went alright, no damage was done. You would have thought that I would have learned from the first few times, but I overextended my walls again. I was so used to having so many gold coins that I could build a wall and immediately upgrade it to stone. That wasn't the case anymore. Winter was really taking a toll on our economy. We didn't have a lot of coins left. And sure enough, the monsters had taken out almost all of my troops once again. The struggle was real. I did end up rebuilding the same wall that had been taken down, but this time I made sure I got it to stone before the end of the night. This time you guys aren't getting in. Oh wait, actually you might. That's a lot of you. Retreat! They're breaking the wall! The monsters had made it in through the first layer of my wall. We had retreated to my second, less sturdy wooden walls. Some of my troops did get taken out, but fortunately, it was the end of the raid. So, we didn't lose too much, but it was sad to see some of the soldiers that I had just trained not survive. I then decided it was a good time to pay a visit to one of my boar friends. I had thrown a coin into the bush, and then she started to charge the walls of my castle. She hit her head right onto the castle wall, then my archers shot their arrows directly at her. Unfortunately, we weren't able to take the boar down. Well, this should have been done a long time ago. As I attempted taking out the boar one more time, the same outcome had occurred. On top of being unsuccessful in taking out that pest, it was also the night of a blood moon. That meant that there were going to be a whole bunch of enemies attacking my castle walls. I wonder if we're going to see any of those special monsters again. Oh, I just had to ask. I made sure that my catapults were firing away at the giant monster. It threw a rock back right over the walls and almost directly into the people who were manning my catapult. The rock wasn't effective, and we were able to keep pelting this big thing with a whole bunch of arrows. Finally, it was taken care of, and we had survived the night. Okay, this is my final attempt, I promise. I tried to take care of the boar one last time, and yes, this time I mean it. We were pelting it with a lot of arrows, and once again, it just yelled at us and then ran the other way. Alright, I give up. Let's focus on something that's actually important now, like rebuilding this ship, or even hiring new farmers. Winter had just ended, and it was time to start making a lot of gold again. Since we could now get our economy back up and running, it was now time to prepare an army again. Once the Vortian army was restored to its former glory, I had sent them out to go and take out the next portal on the right-hand side. There were only 2 left, and we were almost halfway done taking out this one. I planned on sending my troops right back out after dealing with the retaliation wave that I knew for a fact the monsters were going to send out. I made my way over to the final portal, and that was when I saw the monsters start spewing out of it. This really disgusting looking flying monster had emerged out of the portal with all of the usual little small guys. I wasn't really familiar with these kind of monsters, and we had never really seen them before this point. However, they looked like they were going to be pretty effective at taking out my troops. There wasn't a barrier to prevent the flying monsters from getting access to my archers. That's what made them so dangerous. It's also why my soldiers seemed to focus on taking them out first. Things were getting tense. The monsters had almost destroyed my wall completely, and this was a fully upgraded stone wall. Once they did, they immediately started taking out some troops on the back of our retreat line. I really don't know what was going on. Things were honestly taking a turn for the worst. It seemed like every other second something was going wrong, and there was nothing that I could really do about it besides collecting more gold and upgrading our defenses even more. I also needed to get a final attack going on that very last portal, so that's exactly what I did. I had my troops trained and then sent out. We had arrived at the spooky portal at the dead of night, and one of my knights had been taken out almost instantly, so a bunch of the archers had to pull back. I then also decided that it would be best to retreat and rebuild my forces to come back later. Hope was lost on that invasion. It also made sense to finally follow through on what my plan was earlier. Build the walls as close as I could get them to the portal, and then launch my attacks out of the conquered land. My great plan has begun, as I started to construct a wall and remove even more tree. Sure enough, the monsters weren't going to let us do this without resistance. So, a huge swarm of enemy forces had made their way over to my castle walls. Luckily enough, we survived the invasion. But something worse had happened. Something that I would have never dreamed about in 1,000 years. It all happened because I was feeling lazy, and I wanted to use the portal to teleport back into my town. But I didn't know where to teleport to, and I also wanted to see what was going on. So while I was looking through the lenses of the teleportation portal, I had been jumped by an enemy. They hit me, and my crown had gone flying off into the distance, and that was when the teleportation portal actually teleported me. My crown was gone, which meant that I could no longer be the king of this kingdom. This is the story of how I, Noah of the Vortide family, had lost the crown. And that's where I come in. Joshua, son of Noah, heir to the Vortian kingdom. Rumor has it that after my father lost his crown, the monsters had rallied up and taken out all 3 of our castles on each island. Thankfully enough, it looks like some people had survived, and they were able to keep the keep intact on the first island. To represent my family bloodline, we had chosen the colors of green, white, and black. To stand out from my father's flag, I used a dragon instead of a bear, and my dragon was white while his bear was brown. My first order of action was to get the walls back up and running, as well as the economy. Since a lot of the farms were still standing, I just needed to expand my lands a little bit until I could start hiring farmers. And this wasn't that hard to do. We had almost gotten the whole job done within a day. 2 of my farms were now reactive. Well, that didn't take long at all. I continued to expand my walls as far as I could. I wanted to make sure that every single farm was encapsulated by them. I had also started to upgrade my keep. This was necessary because I needed to take out the 2 portals that were still on this first island. We hadn't discovered stone technology until the second island, so I wasn't able to take out the enemy portals, at least until now. We are now 1 step closer. Time to start getting an army going. As I waited for my farms to gather as much food as they could so it could be sold for coins, I had a great idea. I went over to the magical chest guy where I got my magical gems. That was when I went back to the bird that had crash landed. I had used the 2 gems to try and tame the bird. Unfortunately, it looked like it needed 8 more coins. So, I knew I would wait until I had enough and I would come back. Well, that will do it. After making quite a few base improvements that I honestly didn't even need to make because there were only 3 monsters attacking me at a time, I started to head back out to go and tame the griffin. Once I arrived, it seemed like it didn't have much interest in me. That was until it got near the tree. I think it honestly didn't remember me until it saw me in the exact spot that I had saved it. So, I tamed it, and it would now let me ride it. This thing was awesome. I could even tell it to clap its 2 wings together, creating a huge burst of wind. Now this could really be overpowered, especially if there were a lot of enemies that were charging at me. I had also noticed that the griffin seemed like it would feed absolutely anywhere. It would grab worms out of the ground whenever I would stop, so I didn't have to worry about only eating at grass areas. I returned back to the castle with my new mount. Once there, I started to collect all of the gold coins that the farmers were throwing at me. There were so many that my whole gold pouch was completely filled. It seemed like every time that I had a full pouch of gold, time would just start to fly by. I was making upgrade after upgrade inside of the base. I had also started to reconstruct the ship that my father once sailed before me. Now that I'm thinking about it, a lot of the items that required gems never got activated on this first island. So I went around activating absolutely everything I could. One of the first things I activated was a shrine, which seemed like it would increase my archer's effectiveness and maybe even damage. I wish I had that earlier. With my new archer buff, I knew that it was time to send out my troops. We started attacking the portal that was on the dock. We had taken it out fairly quickly, but I didn't bring enough coins to build both the lighthouse and the transportation portal. As I returned back to my castle, I had realized that the retaliation wave was going on. There were quite a lot of enemies, 2 flying ones, a giant monster one, and all the small little guys. This was intimidating because we had just reconstructed this castle. I really didn't want to see it fall so soon. One of the flying monsters had made its way over my walls and inward towards my keep. I didn't know if there were going to be any archers in the archer towers to take care of it. So I went back to check on the large monster, and once it was killed, I headed back over to see what happened to the flying one. Thankfully enough, we didn't take too many losses from the night, so I was able to go into the next day not worrying about building up the army. I was able to focus on constructing the boat and then going back to the lighthouse and portal so I could finally build them. The enemy attacks continued on, but so did ours. The final invasion on this island was launched. We were able to take out the portal in a matter of seconds. It really wasn't that hard. Strangely enough, after the portal was destroyed, I couldn't build a transportation portal on it. But a giant rock did slam into the side of the cliff. Very majestic. As I made my way back towards the castle, I had rung the bell to get everybody on the ship. Now that we had taken care of all of the enemies on this island, it made sense to travel to the next one. On to island number 2. Right as I arrived on the island, I wasted no time at all. I immediately activated the farming shrine, and then paid a visit to my favorite farmer. I then made my way over to make sure all the portals were destroyed on my island. That was when I sailed to Island 3. Once I knocked on the door of one of the hermits, Pointy had immediately made his way over to me. It looked like he was trying to instruct me to do something. He told me to follow him, and when I did, he brought me back to the castle where I was greeted with a whole bunch of coins. I honestly couldn't figure out what Pointy wanted me to do. So I just did my usual check of going to the end of the island to find out if any portal still existed on it. There was still one, so I unleashed the might of the Vortian army directly upon it. With absolutely no hesitation at all, my 3 squads of knights and archers had made their way over to the large and creepy portal. Light work as usual. Once the portal was taken out, I headed directly to the boat and then sailed to the next island. I didn't want to waste any time at all. This was the first island that we arrived at that my father had not been to. So I headed directly to the center and started to build my little camps. I followed in his footsteps and followed the same exact strategy that he used, by trying to get up my town hall as quick as possible. After getting a stable camp set up, I had headed out to see what the island had to offer. The first thing that I had came across was a gem chest. I then headed back to my camp as it was already time for the invasion. There were only 2 enemy monsters that attacked, so this wasn't bad. They didn't really know that we were on this island yet. I secured my walls to the next wood level and then headed out, finding this really cool copper looking factory. I knew that I was going to be able to get copper walls if I had unlocked this. I made it my main goal to save up enough coins to be able to unlock copper working. I was able to grab 1 more gem chest, and then I came across the second portal that was on the left hand side of my castle. I didn't want to keep going any further and get caught by enemies, so I headed back to the castle. It was pretty interesting because that same night I had taken out a small little detachment of enemy monsters, while on the next night there was a whole lot more of them. I really couldn't figure out their battle plans, or if they even had any. Were they really just mindless monsters, or did they actually have a plan after all? Who knows? I decided to go and explore the forest to the right side of my castle. That was when I came across a waterfall that had an egg behind it. The second that I deactivated the waterfall with 3 gems, the egg hatched, and a little reptilian monster had come out of it. Sadly enough, I didn't want to spend any gold coins on this mount if I didn't have to. I ended up leaving it so I could go back to my castle. Trust me, that wasn't going to be the last that we see of it. When I got the opportunity to, I upgraded my farm to tier 3. I then upgraded my keep to stone. After some time, the lizard that I had hatched earlier had made its way over to my base. I decided to give it a chance and mounted it. It was pretty cool because I was able to shoot fire out of its mouth, and it kind of created like a little fire pit that nobody would be able to walk in. Now that's pretty overpowered if you ask me. I'm not gonna lie, taming this lizard was probably the best decision that I could have made. It was the night of a blood moon, and there was an insane amount of enemies. I had even gone a little bit too far outside of my walls that my crown had gone flying. The fire pit really helped out a lot, as my troops were completely overrun by all of the enemies. I even almost died. I made the right move by having my mount spit out a puddle of fire. A lot of the enemies burned up because of it, and it made defending the castle a little bit easier. I didn't really notice it, but there were a whole bunch of giant enemies smacking away at my castle walls. Unfortunately, only 1 wall stood between me and the giant monsters, and they were spawning in a whole bunch of the little guys like crazy. I honestly didn't have much hope that we were going to be able to hold off against all of the enemies that remained. The walls collapsed! The 3 large giants had made their way into my castle. The final right-hand side wall was completely destroyed. I honestly wasn't sure what to do. I was afraid they were going to destroy my keep, but it looked like they weren't even that interested in my keep. They were more interested in trying to kill me. I'm assuming it was the crown. They wanted to take my crown like they had taken my father's. I wasn't going to let this happen. So I pulled a 200 IQ move. I ran behind the walls that were on the left side of my castle. That way, there would be an object between me and these giants. This was definitely a very costly move, and it was sad that I had to do it, as I had lost a lot of troops because of it. But I wasn't going to let the whole dynasty just die right here. So I went behind the 1 wall that remained and started shooting fire at the giant monsters. They had broken their way through the wall with ease. This was it. My life flashed before me. My only hope was to keep shooting puddles of fire down at their feet while they tried to attack me. I would have to dodge their attacks. I even tried to run past them, but they had completely blocked me off and I wasn't able to squeeze through. My last resort was to keep shooting fire at them all the way until we got to the edge of the map. So that was what I committed to. I kept shooting as much fire as I could. And finally, they had all burned up. I was super relieved, as this branch of the Vortide family could have been ended right there and then. It wasn't though. And all I have to say is thank God for this mount. The number one thing that I had to do after we had recuperated was to re-recruit all of the villagers that we had lost. I didn't have enough coins to get all of them at once, so slowly over time, I had built up my population. I think that was the most effective attack that the monsters had ever thrown at us. It was funny going from almost dying to them to seeing them throw waves of enemies at us with only 5 or 6 little monsters. This just made absolutely no sense to me, but I guess they didn't really have a lot of power when it wasn't a blood moon. I honestly needed to prepare for the next one. I didn't know when it would be, but I knew that it was coming up sometime soon. So upgrading every single wall to the max level it could be was a necessity. I had also realized that I didn't unlock copper yet. That harsh invasion had made me completely forget about it, and it wasn't even in my main goal list. Rebuilding the economy and kingdom was. But I knew that it was going to come soon. I was going to be able to get my copper walls and my copper keep very, very soon. I had gotten some bad news that another blood moon was going to happen in the next couple of nights. So I mentally braced for what was yet to come. When it did actually happen, no enemies even attacked my castle. Or at least such a small amount of them did that I didn't even notice we were under attack. I wasn't going to complain about this at all though. It meant that we were guaranteed a safe night for the next one. This was super relieving because I didn't have to actually worry about that blood moon at all. It went by like it was nothing. And I also didn't have to worry about enemies attacking my castle for another night. Due to having 2 peaceful nights in a row, I was able to head over to the copper mine and start production, so we would now be able to build copper buildings and towers. This was going to help us out so much with our defenses. Ah, what a beauty. I wanted to make upgrades to my castle the second that I had gotten home. The only issue was we were under attack, so I couldn't really upgrade the walls until after the attack. While the builders did their thing, I followed Pointy as he appeared out of nowhere. He told me to give some of my coins to the treasurer so that way I could store them for later. The copper walls had finished building. I ran right past them as I felt safe entering my castle. This sense of safety was about to be followed by a sense of luxury. I had started to upgrade my keep to copper. Now that's epic. My keep had finished upgrading, and my towers and walls right outside of my keep were also being upgraded. Now this is going to be a huge upgrade for the kingdom.